Hi guys, hold on for a second. Before we proceed to the video, I have something very important to tell you. Professor John V. Kofus has published his new book in collaboration with Little French Media, and the title of the book is Neoliberalism, Inequality, and Authoritarianism. This book details how neoliberalism impacts the geopolitical economy in the 21st century. You can buy it from Amazon, and the link is in the description. Thank you. Now let's proceed to the video.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is an introductory session, a teaser video, essentially, about the thin veil of American democracy and the slippery slope toward authoritarianism, a topic about which many politicians, scholars, analysts all over the world, not just in the United States, have dealt with, and not just now that President Donald Trump is serving his second term, but rather one that goes back to the period when neoliberalism was in its embryonic stage in the Reagan administration, and there was a concerted effort to weaken the labor unions at the same time, simultaneously, as there was a concerted effort to dismantle the social welfare state while transferring money from those programs um, to, including, by the way, entitlement programs, to support corporate welfare, supporting bailing out banks and corporations. So this is a long-standing issue, a debate that really intensifies in the 21st century. It takes really goes way off the charts in the last 20 years or so, especially after the election of Donald Trump in 2016. He took over, of course, in January 2017. Now, on the 9th of February, 2025, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, went public and stated that the U.S. courts were violating the institutional procedures uh, by questioning executive authority when it came to the issue of President Donald Trump instructing Elon Musk, who is heading um, the group that is in charge of dismantling and weakening and transforming all federal agencies, including, by the way, no one is safe. He has even gone after the CIA. But in any case, in the specific criticism of the vice president, of course, it was the reference was to USAID. Um, the implication of the comment by the vice president of the United States was that he, as well as the administration, accept the unitary executive theory, which of course is contrary to the founding fathers' intent about what kind of social contract the United States ought to have, whether the legislative branch, which has the power of the purse, in other words, distribution of monies, is the one that represents popular sovereignty, that is, represents the American people, the citizenry, or whether powers ought to be concentrated in the executive branch, as though the presidency is like a monarchy. Clearly, the founding fathers rejected the concept of a monarchy, considering the United States was founded in the late 18th century, when in Europe, with the exception of England, there was a system of government on the continent that is known as absolutism, absolute monarchies. And this was something that concerned the founding fathers. So they put a system of checks and balances. Now, here we are in the 2020s, in the mid 2020s, and a sitting vice president comes along arguing that the checks and balances system of government embedded in the Constitution, something that the founding fathers considered sacred, in order to make sure that we avoid tyranny. That's the key word, tyranny. They borrowed that term from the philosopher who founded the creator of the father of Western liberalism, the English philosopher John Locke. John Locke was concerned about tyranny in government. Here we have a sitting vice president who questions checks and balances, embraces unitary executive theory, and apparently he seemed to support, root his arguments, as though that this would give this argument legitimacy, on a Harvard University professor, law professor, who served for the right-wing Justice Antonin Scalia and was infamous for being against pluralism based on the liberal philosophy of John Locke and um, uh, the founding fathers, Jeffersonian democracy, that is, the founding fathers' view of what a republic ought to be about in terms of an institutional structure and social contract. Never mind, of course, that there was slavery at the time. Never mind that there was a population of Native Americans that was marginalized and increasingly so. Uh, those are real issues. However, there was at least a theoretical constitutional framework that had certain protections for both majority and minority, and it had a systems of checks and balances. And the intention behind all of this was to avoid tyranny in society, in government. And the concern was especially the executive branch of government. Now, we have in the last 20 years, as I said, or so, especially after the election of 2016, precisely because the GOP and precisely because of the election of Donald Trump the first time in 2016, a number of scholars, critics, think tank analysts, and so forth, who have argued that the United States is on a slippery slope to authoritarianism, if not fascism. Now, there is a question, of course, and I'll in the longer video, I deal with this much more analytically, whether there can be fascism in the United States. Just briefly, right now, let me tell you, they were the same. They were in interwar Europe. There were people who were saying the same thing about a number of those countries, including the Weimar Republic in Germany. Can we possibly have a totalitarian regime here? I mean, we not really. Conservatives, yes, but not Nazism. Well, they did. In any case, the um, uh, the cumulative effect of, it's not just one thing, by the way, but the cumulative effect of the policies of the GOP, but also some of the policies of Democratic administrations, including those of Joe Biden, especially when it came to foreign policy, which under the Democrats, both Biden as well as Obama, tended to be very militaristic, interventionist, and oblivious to international law, as obviously the United States rejected the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice. Not that the GOP embraced it, by the way. Trump has just announced that he wants to put sanctions on the ICC. In any event, the fact is that Democrats who have embraced militarism as well as neoliberal goals of the neoliberal economy, which is based on class warfare, are just as guilty for laying the groundwork that allow Trump and the GOP to take all of this a step farther to the right toward authoritarianism, or as some scholars maintain, elements of fascism. These are the antecedents to fascism. The issue for me is not just it is not just the thin veil of democracy behind which rest layers of policies that are authoritarian, including the violation of the US Constitution, the delicate balance of power, the checks and balances issue, the vice president openly questioning the judicial branch and its domain, its right to make rulings regarding executive authority and regarding the jurisdiction of the legislative branch of government, which is, of course, the branch of government that represents the American people and has the power of the purse. Okay, there is another issue here besides that. And nor is the issue, by the way, let me just add this, nor is the issue the cult of personality, as many, especially the liberal media in the United States, but also in Western Europe, keep harping on. This is not about Trump. Trump is the manifestation of a society that had the historical antecedents going back 40, 45 years to have a regime of this type that's evolving toward the slippery slope of authoritarianism or neo-fascism, depending whose interpretation you want to accept. There is an institution-wide problem that is far more important than just the political class in the United States. And that institutional problem has to do with other sectors of society. We begin with the media. The media, obviously, has had, according to the Pew Research Center and other public opinion polls, a huge problem with credibility for a good reason. And that is, as Noam Chomsky pointed out in his book a number of decades ago, as well as many others, by the way, that have dealt with the question of how the media presents news. They massage news. The title of Chomsky's book is Manufacturing Consent. They do manufacture that. Not only the manufacture, they manufacture stories. They massage them to the degree that they leave out important information, important empirical evidence completely, have one-sided news perspectives, whether it's, by the way, this is regardless of whether it's the so-called liberal media in the United States or whether the right-wing media. There are very few sources of independent news organizations, and those are struggling to survive constantly. And they are a breath of fresh air because they have no actuary. They're not serving the interests of Wall Street and the military-industrial complex. They're just analyzing empirical data on the basis of that and draw conclusions accordingly. So the media has a credibility problem. There is also then, and that's part of, by the way, that is part of the slippery slope toward authoritarianism. The second is the far right religious groups in the United States, and I'm not just going to single out Christians, but in general, what we have here is that has become the popular base for the far right. So while the media indoctrinates, the religious far right provides the mass base on the basis of dogmatic views regarding morality. And of course, here is an area which is rich in hypocrisy, considering how the leadership of these far right religious organizations uh, lives and behaves versus the reality of what um, versus what they preach. So the reality of their lives, riding around in jet planes and living in huge estates and so forth, and having millions of dollars in bank accounts, versus what they preach to the community. But they provide a part of the cultural base. So the culture in the United States is supporting is fertile ground for fascism. Academic institutions, the same thing. Wall Street, the same thing. The United States is not a full-fledged police military state like Nazi Germany. I want to make sure that point is driven across. It is not a full-fledged Third Reich. It's by far, I disagree with that analysis. However, does it have elements of fascism? Of course it does. It does, and it's unfortunate that some within the GOP, including this administration, and I'm not going to go into the Nazi salutes and all that. That's okay. That's symbolic, and I don't take it seriously. I'm looking at policies. Some of the policies deliberately targeting the marginalized, the weak, and deliberately trying to upset the long-standing liberal constitution and its foundations of separation of powers and amassing authority in the executive. That is a dangerous slope. And I want to end it because I've gone over. I should have checked myself the other time with a comment that the senator from Maine, Angus King, made recently in criticizing what the Trump administration has done with USAID, the agency in charge for humanitarian aid, which it dismantled and gave authority to the State Department. USAID, by the way, was established by Kennedy. It's under congressional mandate. The money comes from Congress. No one other than Congress has authority to uh, to be doing anything with USAID. And Angus King got up on the Senate floor and said, "Forget red lines. Do we have no decency?" This is a line, obviously, he borrowed back during the McCarthyist era, when there was the witch hunts of leftists, of dissidents. There was one member in the legislative branch who came out. Finally, he was disgusted by the propaganda of the far right, the McCarthyists, and he said to McCarthy, Senator McCarthy from Wisconsin, have you no decency? And this is what we have come to, that there is lack of humanity, lack of decency. And that is important as a moral foundation for a government. If it loses that, then it's easy to go ahead and conduct policy that is and embrace authoritarian aspects of authoritarianism and even fascism. And that's what I discussed in the larger video. I ask you to look at that, take a look at that, and to subscribe to this channel, which my very good friend Asad Alim manages. And I thank you for listening.